Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Flying with Overkill, AV-8B Harrier for DCS World, and today we're going to be talking about the three different methods of takeoff for the Harrier. We have first, which is conventional, which is we're just going to shoot down the runway, get to our rotation speed, and pull the nose up and get on out of here. Second one is going to be the short field takeoff, in which we could do some calculations, but honestly I'll probably just show you guys the short version of it, and then the final option is, of course, the one everyone is always raging about, the vertical takeoff. Before we do so, we need to talk about the HUD and some of the symbology on it. Okay, so let's go ahead and zoom in on our HUD for a minute. Let me lock my camera up here. All right. Let's go up to the top here first, starting, we have our pitch carrots. The idea behind the pitch carrots is we set our angle of attack for, or our pitch rate, I should say, for our takeoff. And the idea is to take our witch's hat here and line it up with the pitch carrots after we confirm that they're set at the proper angle, which should be 6 degrees above the horizon line. As you can see, they basically are here. Here's the 5-degree mark on the positive angle. All right. Then here we have our heading tape sitting on the 5-degree line there, with our heading carrot in the center here, both on top and bottom here. We have our indicated or calibrated airspeed, our current altitude above sea level. The circles with the identifiers in them are RWR repeaters for the HUD. We have our climber descent rate in feet per minute, waypoint selected and distance to waypoint, time according to Zulu, our nozzle position. You can see they're currently the 99 degrees on the aft position, so they're pointed down and forward actually a bit. Our fuel flow, or excuse me, not fuel flow, our flap setting, sorry, our RPM setting, our JPTL temperature in Celsius, angle of attack analog digital read. We also have a vertical velocity carrot here, which you can certainly see is centered at the moment, but as we climb or descend, you'll see it rotate and draw a line based on the severity of the descent or the climb. Our current ground speed, okay, and then our slip indicator. Okay, now the slip indicator is also identified here by the slip vane. The slip vane down here is this gray thing sticking up. And what it will do is if you have a crosswind, you'll see it rotate one direction or the other. Now this is important to pay attention to because on takeoff, especially when using short field takeoff, the idea is to get as much of that wind underneath the wings as possible the second we get the wheels up. So once the wheels come off the ground, you want to crab the aircraft whatever direction you need to using the rudder to make sure that this is centered. Okay, you want it to be pointed. Even though the aircraft may be crabbing a little bit down the runway, the idea is to get that wind speed underneath the wings, increasing the lift. The other very important thing to make sure you try to do as much as possible on takeoff is to keep the wings level. Again, because of their odd shape, they don't generate the lift that some of the more conventional aircraft do, and they can become pretty unstable pretty quickly. And we'll see that more as we get into the flight of the aircraft. All right. That's the basic gist of what we needed to talk about today. A couple of things to note, obviously, are your horizon line and the flight path indicator. Okay, now the flight path indicator is different from the pitch carrot, or the witch hat, excuse me, as the witch hat indicates the depression, the nose position, where the flight path marker still determines the actual end point for the aircraft's flight or direction of travel. Okay, so it's still just like any other aircraft. Wherever this circle is where you're going to end up. So if this is pointed at a tree or a mountain, do something different. Okay? All right, guys. So let's go ahead and talk about how we're going to set up for today's flight. All right, so the first thing we're going to do to set up for our takeoff here is we're going to select the VSTOL button, which brings up the ODU, or on display options, I believe. What does it say? Yeah, option display unit. Gosh. I'm all over the place. And first we have our NRAS. This is nozzle rotation airspeed. Now normally this would be calibrated, but since we're doing a conventional takeoff, we can basically set this at 135 knots as a good reference point if you don't want to do the calculations that's necessary. And really for DCS World, it's just not. So what we're going to do is type in 135 for 135 knots and press enter. Now what will happen here at this point is, let's double click that again. I want to make sure that actually selected. It did. Good. What will happen is once we reach our rotation airspeed, the airspeed indicator up here will have a green box that box up around it. At that point, we'll start rotating the nose up for our climb. Next, we want to set our pitch carrot. We want to make sure it's set to 14 degrees. And this is 14 degrees from the witch's hat current position, which puts it at positive 6 degrees above the horizon line. Now, it should be there by default, so at that point, we're just going to press enter, make sure it's locked in, which it already is. Okay, now, to set up the aircraft for takeoff, we want, if you were in a heavy condition, which we're really not, we've got a few weapons on board, a couple of Mavericks and a couple of AIM-9s, but nothing critical. But if you were real heavy, we would set the water to takeoff, okay, our H2O injector to takeoff, but we're not going to worry about that today, as I don't believe that we're heavy enough. Now, if we had a couple of fuel tanks on board and a couple weapons, or maybe full fuel load, for a long flight, you would absolutely want that. And again, the idea behind that is to be cooling the engine until enough wind is passing through the intakes to cool it externally. All right. Want to make sure, because we're doing a land run here, we want to make sure that the anti-skid switch is not set in nose wheel steering, as you'll get a master caution. So we want to make sure anti-skid is on. We want the flaps in either cruise or auto position. I leave them in auto. All right. And then we want our nozzles to be set at a 10-degree point, which you can see here more accurately. So there's 10 degrees. And then as we get airborne and get some airspeed behind us and get the gear up, we'll go ahead and move that into the 0 position to the full straight off position. All right. Other than that, we're basically set for takeoff. So let's go ahead and get this girl rolling here. The only other thing that we're going to do here is depress our brakes, let the engine ramp up, and then we'll get out of here. So I'm starting to apply power. And at about 60 knots, we'll gain rudder authority. Until then, you need to make sure you hold your nose wheel steering button. So RPMs are at 60%. There's 80%. Letting go of the brakes. Going into full. There's 60 knots. Letting go of nose wheel steering. Approaching our rotation speed. Pulling back on the nose. Getting that witch's hat up where it goes. Whoa, little rocky. And there's my wing dip. We don't want that, so trying to level those wings. Gear up, positive rate. Altitude. That's the low altitude warning. That's fine. Not a big deal. Once we get above it, there you can see it clears. All right, we're going to go flaps into cruise position. And there's our climb out. And now we can slowly move our exhaust nozzles into the 0 position, so we're straight out. And then reduce our speed down to a nice 300 knots climb out and climb to your desired rate. All right, and that is a conventional climb for the AV-8B Harrier. Not much to it, pretty simple. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at what a short field takeoff would look like in the Harrier. All right, guys, so now we're going to talk about the short field takeoff. Now, there's a couple things to be aware of with short field takeoff, but it's not too critical. There is a detailed process in which you would get exact numbers. We're not going to go through that today. Today, what I'm going to do is give you guys a generalized settings that works in just about any condition that I've seen yet for DCS World. Let me know in the comments below if you guys are interested in getting the exact how-tos right down to the detail. And the reason why I'm asking that is because in order to calculate exact, you would need runway distance, meaning runway length, the runway heading, wind direction, current altimeter, weight of the aircraft, and I'm missing one. What am I missing? Oh, no, I guess that's it. So you'd have to calculate all of that information, gather that information accordingly, which means you'd have to use ATC from the start in order to make sure you get the current altimeter. If that's something that you guys are interested in, let me know, and we can definitely go through a tutorial separate on that. But this is just a basic parameters that will definitely get you guys up in the air. And like I said, in just about any condition that I can think of that I've experienced thus far. I played around with a few different locations, even set it on a road at one point, and it worked just fine. So hopefully this works out for everybody. All right, so first thing is we're going to go to VSTOL and we're going to set our nozzle rotation airspeed. Now, this is actually going to be the speed at which we rotate the nozzles. We're not going to be, this isn't the rotation of the nose yet. All right, so we're going to set it at 125 knots. This works for just about any payload. And keep in mind right now we have 4 Mavericks on board and 2 AIM-9s. Pitch carrots, we still want to make sure those are at 14, so that's good there. Anti-skid, you still want to make sure that's on. Okay, flaps can be in auto or STOL, it's up to you. And then something that I should have mentioned in the conventional takeoff that needs to be done here as well is we need to set the stabilator to 2 degrees nose down. Now I'm going to be using down here as it gives us the precise reading. Now a quick tap will give you 0.1, but I'm going to hold. And there we go, 2 degrees nose down. All right, and that's for any takeoff. You want 2 degrees nose down. Does not matter what kind of takeoff you're doing, 2 degrees nose down on the takeoff. All right, next thing we need to do is we're going to set our thrust nozzles at 60 degrees. So I'm watching right here. And once we have that, I'm going to move the stopper up to that position. Now be careful, because if you bump it, you'll move the thrust nozzles forward. All right, that's good. All right, so what I do is put it just before and then pull the nozzles back a bit again, make sure we're still at 60. All right, and now no matter what I do with the thrust nozzle lever, it stops at 60 degrees, and that's important for what we're going to be doing. Once you have that, set it back to 10 as we need that for the initial roll. Okay, so how this is going to play out from here on is we're going to power up the aircraft to 80% on the RPMs. We're going to then release the brakes and go to full RPM as long as we don't exceed the limiter. What's going to happen as we start powering up is you're going to see most of this information down here disappear, and we're just going to see an R with a octagonal shape going around it. If that octagonal shape goes complete and then extends a little bit, which I'll try to show you guys, that means you've passed the thrust limits or the RPM limits of the engine, okay, in the current state. All right, so watch for that, guys, and I'll try to pause it. It's going to make my flying a little goofy because I don't have the pause button mapped to anything. So just understand why I'm doing that and why I want to show you guys. All right, and just like before, we want to make sure to try to keep the wings level. Make sure our slip indicator is centered and the slip vane isn't rocking any way. Now, if we had any wind coming across it, it would be very important on takeoff to rotate the aircraft, the nose, into the direction of the wind. No matter what, even if that's crabbing us down the runway, we want that wind straight down the fuselage of the aircraft, getting under our tiny little wings. Okay, part of what makes the Harrier so unstable is the way the wings are set. Okay, it takes a bit more for them to generate the lift, okay, versus some of the other aircraft such like a F-14 or even F-18 or F-15, right, where the entire fuselage is one giant lift of wing, right, or a lift. So anyway, that's basically it for here. Let's go ahead and get this thing rolling. So again, powering up the RPMs up to 80%. Beater on the brake. Okay, letting go. Pushing forward. All right, pausing for a second. This is the RPM limiter. Okay, so what's going to happen as I continue to add RPM, as I continue to push that throttle forward, this is going to come around and it will complete. Okay, and once it completes the octagon, you're at the limit. If the line starts to extend upward, we've exceeded the limit of the engine. Okay, so we need to pull the throttle back a little bit, and I'll show you guys what that looks like. So here we go. It's all going to happen pretty fast. So there's too much, pulling it back. There's our rotation speed, pulling the nozzles back to 60, lifting the nose up, pulling up, getting up to our witch hat where the pitch carrots are. Okay, gear up for positive rate. Starting to pull the nozzles forward, slowly transitioning. It's not something that you'd want to do real fast. Got that airspeed going, all right. Flaps can now come into the cruise position. Nozzles can return to the full forward position. And now, throttle back to manage the airspeed for our climb out. Okay, optimum airspeed for climb out for the Harrier is about 300 knots. All right, and that is our short field takeoff, guys. So now, let's take a look at the one that everybody's been waiting for, the vertical takeoff. All right, guys, so the first thing to a vertical takeoff is the weight. The aircraft cannot exceed 20,500 pounds. Okay, now keep in mind, that's the limit, right? So you obviously want to be significantly less than that if possible. This is where you're going to have to do, well, weights and balances. You need to determine how far you need to fly. Is there a tanker available that you can gas up to once you're airborne? Okay, you're going to have to assess your situation before you determine what needs to go. Okay, or do you just not have the option of carrying the payload you'd prefer to carry? All right, so the first thing I'm going to start with, as we're just doing a demonstration, is we're just going to use the fuel. All right, and we're going to take it down. Yeah, like this is... I can take 10% of fuel. Okay, so obviously that's not going to work. It's our payload. So now let's take a look at a lighter payload. Let's see what happens when we drop the gun pod. Okay, we're at 25,000, so that's a pretty big jump. Now, we still have to do something different here. So let's create a new payload here. Let's call it new payload. Oh, apparently it already exists. And let's see here. We'll just call this demo for now. And we don't need full fuel, so let's go with like 50%. All right, so right there, we're at 18,000 pounds. We don't have a lot of payload that we can carry today. But let's see if we can take a couple of air-to-ground missiles. All right, so let's look at the AGM-65F. Let's look at the TV guided. AGM-65F. And there's our 20,000 right there already. And we're probably going to need a lightning pod. All right, so now we can get even less. So now we need to drop our fuel back again. So 25% fuel already. So it's really limited to what you can do here. And maybe at least, you know, an AIM-9. Let's see what we get. 19,374 pounds. So we should be under the limit. It should be good to take off. Can we remove... Nope, we can't remove the pylon. All right. That's fine. Okay. So we're going to have to run with that. Now this would be, you know, a real close-in scenario, you know. But if we drop the T-pod, for example, that takes almost 1,000 pounds off this thing. Well, it takes about 500 pounds. Sorry, about 600 pounds. Anyway, so now let's go ahead and get in the jet. All right, so now that we're in the jet, let me show you how you guys would check your weight if you weren't in the mission editor. First thing we're going to do is go to menu here, go to VREST, and VTO for vertical takeoff. And our weight is right there. Okay, 19,364 pounds. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look at how we're going to do this today. First thing we do is set our nozzle position at 82 degrees. Okay, you can pull your stopper up if you want, but you don't have to. We're not going to be rolling it forward any further. That's 83. There's 82. Okay, so nozzles at 82 degrees. Flaps to STOL. Water to takeoff. Trim, 2 degrees nose down, as always. All right. And one smooth motion, what we're going to do is start applying power until we clear ground effect, which should be about 25 feet. Okay, then we can reduce the power and try to hold a quick hover for a minute. If we have crosswind, just like before, make sure your slip indicator and slip vane are straight down the fuselage. So turn the aircraft using your rudders however you would need to make sure that wind's going straight down the center of the plane. Okay, you're going to need that lift for transition. All right. In our case, you know, we're just going to hold it nose level, okay, and then start moving our pitch carrot up to, or our witch set up to the pitch carrots as we slowly begin transitioning the nozzle forward. Okay, you don't want to do it too fast. Okay, if you do it too fast, you're not going to have enough forward momentum. The plane's going to fall out of the sky and, you know, turn into a big burning ember. All right, so here we go. I'm going to keep my feet on the brake. We don't want to be rolling forward, and start applying our power. All right, slowing down, pitching that nose up a bit, adding power. It's a little tricky. Yo, baby. This definitely takes some practice. Start pitching that nose up. I'm going to start pulling my nozzles forward. Notice my nozzles are only at 40. Getting that airspeed going. Gears coming up. Flaps are going to auto. Now at this point we'd want to switch the water off. So I'm going to fly stupid for a second because I didn't map it like a dork. Map this switch somewhere, guys. It's pretty critical for this. Alright, and now we've reached our cruising speed, pulling back on the throttle. And we're out of there. Now I know that was a little messy, guys. it's really weird when you're trying to talk your way through at the same time. This is one of those planes that sort of gets you. And I'm used to doing it in VR, so you get a better depth perception. For me, the vertical takeoff and landing in the Harrier is really hard to do on a monitor. And for those of you who are VR pilots, I'm sure you guys can understand. Oops, let's add some power. Getting a little slow. There we go. All right. Anyway, but you guys hopefully caught the principles of it. It's definitely something that requires practice. And don't be afraid to tweak your controls. Okay? Adjust your access tunes and things like that to where the takeoff is comfortable for you. Okay? And the final thing that we're going to look at today, guys, is a takeoff from the Tarawa. So I will see you guys in just a minute. All right, guys, so here we are on the deck of the LHA Tarawa, ready for a takeoff. Now, first thing, weight requirement. So once again, find our weight. Okay, we can go into VREST, and we can go to STO, and you'll have your gross weight here. VTO, gross weight here. Okay, we use STO for here. All right, and what we're going to be worrying about again is making sure we are under 25,200 pounds. Okay, now what we're going to do also is set our stopper to the 60-degree mark. If we pull our exhaust nozzles back, you can see they stop at 60 degrees. Make sure flaps are in the auto position or STOL. Okay, even if no, disregard that. They need to be in STOL. And then you can see that the nozzle or the flap position changes with the nozzles. Okay, so if I pull the nozzles forward back to our 10-degree line, notice the flaps are also adjusting their position. Okay, so we want 10 degrees for roll. Okay, and then what's going to happen is when we cross that line, the nozzle rotation line, we're going to pull these nozzles back to 60 degrees, get the pitch carrot or the witch's hat up to the pitch carrot. All right, and then gradually, once the wheels are off the deck, gradually start pushing forward to 25 degrees on the nozzle. Okay, and then once we exceed our 120 knots, obviously gear up, flaps up, and start gradually increasing to 10 knots rotation, just like we did before. All right, so I know that's a lot. Hopefully it'll make more sense as we accelerate. We only need water injection if we are really heavy. We're not, so we should be okay. It should be rather quick. Obviously still watch the RPM limit. Make sure it doesn't go full and past. If it does, reduce the RPMs to compensate. All right, stabilator in a Tarawa Takeoff is actually set to 0. I know I said before that that set -2 as well is not true. We want 0 from the deck. We want to make sure anti-skid is off. Okay, you do not want it on when on deck. All right, and other than that, we should be ready to roll. So, wheels on the brakes, or feet on the brakes, adding power to 80. Off the brakes, adding RPMs. This happened really quick. Exhaust nozzles back. Pitch carrot up. We've reached our speed already, so gradually moving those exhaust nozzles forward. Gear comes up. Flaps go into auto. And start pushing our nozzles forward for the center position. And adjusting RPMs for climb out speed. Now, some of that action was a little slow. Okay, for example, the exhaust nozzles going to where they needed to go, a little on the slow side, flaps coming up a little on the slow side, gear coming up a little on the slow side. And that's because I wanted to make sure I had time to call it all out for you guys. Oops, I don't know, I'm touching the wrong one. There we go. And so when you guys do it yourselves, just remember those steps, but it'll be bang, bang, bang. It happens really fast coming off the deck of the Tarawa. All right, and there is actually one more takeoff to show you guys, and that is the vertical roll takeoff. All right, so we're going to go back to the land for a second, take a look at that one, and then we'll wrap up takeoffs for the Harrier. All right, guys, so for the final one, we're going to be doing a rolling vertical takeoff. Now, it's important to remember we must have at least 100 feet of rolling space, so rolling runway available to us. Difference is we're going to set our stop lever at 70 degrees. Once 70 degrees is set, move your exhaust nozzles to 30 degrees, as we see here. Okay, we're going to roll the RPMs forward to 110%. Once we see 110, we're going to pull the exhaust nozzles back to 70. So just basically pull it back to the stopper. Okay. Get the pitch carrot or the witch's hat up to the pitch carrot. We should start lifting off immediately at 120 knots airspeed. Gear up, flaps up, start slowly gear up, start rotating the nozzle forward, getting that forward airspeed just like before. Shutting the water off at 120 knots as well if you have your water running. Similar weight restrictions apply to a vertical takeoff, so you want to be right around that 20,500 limit. Okay, you go much higher than that, and the heavier you are, the more distance you're going to need. So try to keep it basically same parameters. This is not something that's typically used on the Tarawa, so keep that in mind. This is for short field takeoffs from like a FARP, okay, a forward arming and refueling point, right? All right, so let's give this a shot. So wheels on the brakes, getting our power rolling. Off, looking for that 110%. There it is, pulling us back. We're up. Pitch carrots up. Pushing the nozzles forward. Slowly moving back to that 30 degrees. 120 knots achieved. Gear up. At this point, we would shut the water off if we had it running. Nozzles going forward still. Flaps to auto or cruise. And power to climb. And that's it, guys. Nice quick up and out. And we're on our way. So I hope you guys have enjoyed these tutorials. If you guys have any questions or comments, as always, leave them in the field below. If you guys need me to go over something again in further detail, or if I missed something, misspoke on anything, please let me know. I don't want to be giving misinformation. At the same token, remember the objective here is to get someone who's brand new to the aircraft up and flying either in their own simulator or missions or flying up with friends. So not everything is meant to be right 100% on the money as long as it works. All right, guys, so I will see you guys in the next one. As always, stay safe, stay healthy. Talk to you soon.